So my name is Matt Robertson. I work as a staffing services lead at Google UK, usually based in London. My background is in pharmaceutical science, so I actually graduated back in 2008 from the University of Hertfordshire with a pharmaceutical science degree. I've been at Google for about a year, and my experience before then was 12 years in the pharmaceutical sector. I know that the job title staffing services lead probably doesn't mean a lot to a layperson, so to clarify, I'm actually a manager in our interview operations team at Google. Our team coordinates for Google across all roles and regions. That means it could be interviews for interns to senior vice presidents. It could be in the sales org or software engineers. And our team kind of coordinates all of that work. And it's not just the coordination, it's also the kind of the process improvement as well. Traditional companies may see the kind of interview coordination work sit under traditional recruiter roles, but at the scale at which Google operates and is growing, we need to have it as a separate team. And it's also really important to us to make sure that we have a fair and equitable process for people to go through as well. So a lot of attention gets focused to looking at kind of the interview panels we have and the process and removing bias from kind of all stages of hiring. More specifically, my role includes line management. So I have a team of around 8 people based in London and Tel Aviv. I am working on resource management. I have oversight of a specific hiring area of Google. So I look after roles moving into our tech organization. I also am responsible and either lead or sponsor specific projects which help move our interview operations forward. And on a day-to-day basis, that could look like me meeting with my teams for one-to-ones to see how they're getting on with their work, meeting with leads in our EMEA region, so Europe, Middle East, and Africa. It could be connecting with our peers on a global level to talk about resourcing to make sure we have enough people across the globe to cover all the work that's coming through, or meeting with staffing partners in the wider kind of staffing organization to make sure that any issues they're seeing and any problems they're having, that we can work through together. My professional capacity, I've only ever worked for one other company, right, which is Roche. So, and I actually started there before graduating. I started there in 2006 as a placement student and was a clinical trial assistant and worked there for about 14 months between my second and final year. And it was an amazing experience, right? I got to kind of understand the world of clinical research. I got taught all those life skills you may not get taught anywhere else about how to craft a nice email and how to kind of document, nice spreadsheets, take minutes, build agendas, that kind of stuff. And it was just really good office, I would say, experience. And as well as giving me an education around what kind of roles existed inside a pharmaceutical company in the clinical research space. It also gave me a huge benefit. So when I graduated in 2008 with a 2-1 in pharmaceutical science, I was fortunate enough to be back at Roche a week later, and this time in a training role to be a CRA. And I worked as a CRA for about 5 years, which I know for some people might feel like quite a long time in one role. The important thing for me, I think, is to make sure it kind of didn't feel like one role, or the fact I was continually learning. And that was really important to me, I think, in my engagement and making sure that I felt like I had that progression, especially kind of being so young in my career. In the CRA role, I did that by switching therapy areas. So I worked on breast cancer and virology, rheumatoid arthritis. I did it by moving to maybe earlier phase monitoring as well. So I think, phase 2, phase 3 is kind of where you start, and then moving into phase 1 always feels a bit more high pressure and exciting. I got to support new monitors. I ended up doing some audits, being audited as well, which is always a bit scary. And then towards the end of that kind of 5-year period, getting really involved in global initiatives to support our monitoring processes. And that was things like iPad apps and that kind of stuff to really help us kind of work more efficiently as a monitoring team. And I think that was kind of the first step to maybe diversifying my career. Or diversifying kind of the role I did. And in 2013, my manager at the time assigned me to a work stream we had in our department called data-driven decision-making, which I thought sounded so dull, right, compared to the other ones that were ongoing at the time, like site relations and virtual trials and all the kind of the cool stuff. So initially, full confession, was a bit reluctant, but trusted my manager's judgment and kind of got involved. And again, this was, I think, a pivotal turning point for me, because I didn't realize, but I was actually kind of a secret data, kind of geek and spreadsheet lover. And moving into this work stream allowed me to kind of exercise those skills a lot more. I also started to realize it was maybe skills that other people didn't like, right? I know so often I talk to people who are like, oh, I hate spreadsheets and I hate data, and me loving it kind of opened up a whole avenue of stuff to me that I could make my own as well. What that ended up with in the same year is actually me getting an entirely different role. So I ended up becoming a business support manager, and did that for about 1.5 years. So what was originally a 20% project became a full-time role. That job itself meant I was looking at local kind of systems and reporting optimization, and helping our leadership team understand our business delivery. So lots of kind of key performance indicators and read out metrics to understand how we were delivering as a business. Using that data to drive department insights and kind of future direction, that sort of thing. And it was really interesting. I did it for about 1.5 years. And in late 2014, the option to do a secondment came up. It was in a global team for process improvement. And I jumped at the chance to kind of pick up that secondment. The reason for it, I'd spent a couple of years talking to a peer of mine who also works in that department, and I saw that she was flying all over the world and, kind of getting really involved, not on the kind of the side systems, but the source systems that we used. And I thought, that's where I want to be. That's where I want to have the most impact. So I had kind of convinced myself that was the perfect place for me to be. And I did a rotation because I always felt that that's kind of a safe option sometimes to try something so different, or to try something out, which would have meant that after that year I would go back to my original role, but it would give me an amazing chance to learn. And the funny thing was, whilst I got to work with amazing people and work on some really interesting projects, it isn't actually as fulfilling as I first thought. And I'm still struggling to this day to kind of work out why, but there was something maybe in my gut that was saying, this isn't maybe right for you. And I persevered, I did my best, and I still take out of that secondment the fact it was an opportunity to learn that wasn't the right avenue, right? So whilst I didn't move into it or grow into that space, it also allowed me in my career to kind of to rule that out for further as a further move. Towards the end of that rotation, so kind of the middle of 2015, my former manager in my business support role actually left Roche, and so his job became available, and I jumped at the chance to apply for that as well. There was something in the back of my head at the time where I was like, hey, I'm moving from this great global role, this global opportunity, back to working maybe in a local leadership team. And I remember a discussion that myself and the hiring manager had where I think I almost downplayed the role because I thought, well, it's local, so where's the excitement in that? And that was mistake number one, right? So more to come on that point. But if I can call anything out there, I would say don't look at local versus global and think that one is better than the other. Both are equally challenging. If anything, sometimes local roles come with a more nuanced need for the detail and the minutiae and stuff. So you can gain a lot of expertise and challenges out of that sometimes in a global role you don't need to have, or different challenges. So I applied for the role. I was successful, which actually was a little bit surprising because it also came with line management responsibilities. And at this point in my career, I hadn't line managed anybody. It was exciting and it was terrifying because the team was quite small. It was about 3 people and me. But I also knew that I would be moving from kind of a peer-to-peer relationship to a manager to individual contributor relationship. So some of my kind of work relationships would change and evolve. I also knew that I'd be managing people who had been working in the company for 20 plus years. And I'm thinking, what are they going to think of this under 30-year-old coming in, telling them how things should be done, or trying to give them direction. So all these things were kind of rattling around in my brain. I worked in that role for 4 years, and in head of business support in Roche, in clinical operations. The job was quite diverse. So again, it was things like resource management. We were a department of about 200 people at one point. So that's a lot of resources to make sure that we have to support all the projects. The budget came with that. Contract management as well. So we had contract management under our team. So kind of the legal part of that work. We had study startup. So a team of startup specialists who are amazing at getting our sites up and running pretty quickly, working through all the ethical applications, again, the contract negotiations. We had vendor management. A big thing that happened kind of in my time at Roche as well is the partnership with IQVIA. And so having a team to pull that relationship together, the kind of vendor oversight as well. Some big interesting responsibilities that fit into that role. And over that time, the team started as 4 people, including myself. And when I left in 2019, it was about 22 people. And some of that was just through natural growth. The department got bigger, therefore we needed more support. Other parts were through integration of other groups, which just made sense as and when we refined our management structure and our department structure. So what kind of moved me from the world of Roche and kind of clinical trials into Google? Well, I had a really amazing manager in my last role at Roche, and I remember a conversation we had probably about 2 years before me actually leaving, where we were in a development or career discussion, and she floated the idea that I work somewhere else. And we were talking about the fact my CV wasn't maybe super diverse, right? It had 4 or 5 different roles all inside Roche, so it didn't look maybe as strong as it could be. And I misinterpreted that conversation at the time to think that she was trying to manage me out of the organization, that I was somehow not performing. So I remember shutting it down so quick and being like, no, not happening, not happening, not happening. And about a year later, I actually kind of, maybe it took a year, but realized what she was trying to do. And so reopened the conversation. And we then started talking about what it was that I enjoy, right? Or what are the things that I'm passionate about, and where do I want to continue to grow? And I landed on 2 things, which was actually quite a short list. The first was line management, and the second was data. And and she called out, she goes, you haven't said science, you haven't said like the patient, or you haven't said drugs, right? And we had this discussion about the fact that sometimes when she would walk to work, she'd be thinking, how do I get this molecule to market, and how do I get it through kind of all the various processes? And my brain was, how do I get my team to succeed today? And how do I use this data to best make a decision? And so she said, with that, you could work somewhere else. And so where else to work in terms of people management and data than at a company like Google? And so I put my focus to applying at Google. And it took a year, is the first point. So here's a lesson in perseverance. I started in the summer of 2019, and I had 6 failed applications before I finally got one that got me an interview. Throughout that period, my CV changed from being a 2-page, black and white document to something slightly more, that end up looking more like an infographic, right? And just trying to call out my competencies a bit more. It had a timeline of my own growth and progression through my management role, which I saw was really important to the role I was moving into in Google. And then, and finally secured that role. And I remember, when I was applying for it, people asked me a lot of questions about, to your earlier question, kind of, it's quite an interesting move from the world of ClinOps into HR, into recruitment at a tech company. But pivoting on those 2 things, pivoting on the love of managing people and wanting to see people succeed, and pivoting on the fact that I like data and being able to use it to drive operations forward. They were 2 massive things that the company was looking for, which I was able to convince them that I was the right person for the role. What does the future look like for Matt? I am going to give a controversial answer and say I'm not quite sure, right? I mean, the immediate thing that I'm doing, and something that my current manager and I talk about, is actually the transition from the world of pharma to tech, right? It's quite a big one. And so I'm actually kind of going through a bit of even a year into role, it's still kind of a settling phase. Being 12 years at one company, being able to kind of know exactly where something's filed, exactly how systems work, to going to a completely new part of the business, a completely new sector, it can be a huge learning experience, right? And to think about my next step so quickly is maybe selling myself short, right? So what I'm doing is I'm going through almost like a stabilization process to go and also to really pressure test my assumptions that what I hold dear is people management and data, and actually, are they the 2 things I love? And am I missing anything out, right? From moving out the world of healthcare and pharmaceuticals, will I actually miss some of the stuff there that I took for granted or not? So I'm still going through a bit of a journey of self-discovery to kind of work out what it is I enjoy and what it is I want to continue to focus on. I know that people management is very dear to me. I often feel a huge obligation to my team, and towards my end at my time at Roche, a few of my team went to different roles, and a few of them left the company. And that was initially quite hard for me to kind of deal with, right? Because I felt like it was some kind of failing on my behalf. But actually, I was able to kind of get myself into a mindset where I could share their success, right? I think actually, they're doing so well, and then hopefully in part it's through discussions we've had or through some way that I've been able to support them. And it's something I've taken with me to Google as well. So since joining Google, even last week, one of my team has moved into a new role inside the company. And I remember, initially he raised it with me and said, "Hey, I'm looking at this new role," and was kind of worried that I was going to not be supportive, but actually incredibly supportive to the move and stuff as well. So the point here is that people management is something I want to continue to look at. Managing managers is also important to me as well. So in a couple of years' time, I'd love to see me, with a bigger manager bench that I can help impart wisdom to, so they in turn can help their team. And beyond that, I'm still trying to work it out. And I think that's fine, right? I think if I look back to my career, a lot of these things, if I come back to that point around the data-driven decision-making, if you'd asked me in 2008 when I started being a monitor what my career path looked like, I would have told you that I'd be a monitor, then I'd be a clinical country study manager, then I'd go from there to being a global study manager, to a global lead, to a programs lead, to then kind of beyond that, right? And so the next level of global impact I could have and program impact I can have. And at no point did I think that kind of the world of process improvement and kind of business management would come into the mix. So I think continuing to learn what it is I love and don't love, and kind of being mindful of opportunities as and when they approach and how they fit into that, is kind of where I'm heading.